Good evening, Purple family. Welcome to another episode of Shades of Purple, a Prince podcast. On tonight's episode, I will be reviewing Vanity's book, Blame It on Vanity, and I will be talking about her relationship with Prince. So this episode is going to serve two purposes. It's going to work as a book review of her book, and then it's going to serve as another episode in my ongoing series, The Purple Kingdom, in which I'm talking about the different people in Prince's camp and their relationship with him. So this will be serve as Vanity's episode. So let's get right into it. So in the very beginning of her book, and I'll be using Vanity and Denise Matthews, which of course was her real name. I'll be using those two names kind of interchangeable. Now, when we get to the point where Denise really starts talking about her conversion and, when she just became a born-again Christian, we'll only refer to her as Denise because to respect, her wishes. I think that would be something that she would have wanted because, after she gave her life to Jesus, she, threw off the name Vanity and she never picked that back up again, even though people, even to this day, know her as Vanity. That wasn't a name that she used after she made her full conversion over into, because she became like a pastor. And she threw away that whole, she considered Vanity to be like, to quote a biblical phrase, like her old man. So she didn't want to have anything to do with that persona at that time. So I'm going to respect that. And so when we get to that point where we're talking about that, I will only refer to her as Denise. But in the beginning, I'll kind of use Denise and Vanity kind of interchangeable. So just wanted to say that off the top. So let me get back to it. So in the very beginning, like I said, going back to the very beginning of the book, Vanity talks about her mother. Her mother was a German Jew named Helga. And she was a little girl growing up around the World War II. Toward the story picks up right at the end of World War II, actually. And so we come to find out that little Helga, Denise's mother, is abandoned at a train station in Germany by her mother, a woman named Katie. And the reason why this was done was because Katie's mother, which was Denise's great-grandmother, had died. And Katie, for whatever reason, did not want to raise her own child. So she pretty much abandoned her at this train station, and Helga would later get sent to a home, like a group home with other children. Probably these other children more likely, I guess it was basically like an orphanage, you could say. So she gets stuck at this orphanage, and that's basically like how she grows up. And she ends up immigrating to some point from Germany to Canada, where she meets Denise's father. And Denise is born on January 4th, 1959 in Canada. And when Denise was 4 years old, it seems like the generational curse, I guess you could call it, or for whatever reason, her mother Helga decided to abandon her and left her, Denise, with her father. And when Denise was left with her father, she come to find out that she had two sisters, Patty and Debbie. And of course, she, was just torn away. I mean, her mother, the way she described it in the book was that her mother just pretty much dropped her off and left her at this unknown residence. Because at this point, I don't think Denise ever had met her father or really knew who her father was. And I think the only thing that she knew about her father was that he lived in some other place. And so for whatever reason, her mother felt like she could not take care of her in the same way that her mother did her, which I've never understood, generational, pain and trauma like this, because this was done to Helga. So I always wonder what would make you as a mother decide, okay, well, this was done to me, so I'm going to do it to my daughter. Like, it's just devastating. I mean, it is so sad. And actually also Denise also talked about before her mother abandoned her to go live with her father, that she was molested at the age of 4. So I don't know. I'm assuming this was maybe right before her mother abandoned her. She said that it was a friend of her mother that violated her. So it was a very, very sad story. I mean, going all the way back to Helga and the fact that she was abandoned, and now she abandons Denise to live with her father. Now, her father would turn out to be very, very abusive, and to the point where he would beat not only Denise, but Patty and Debbie as well. And in particular, she talked about how her father would beat Debbie because she had a tendency to wet on herself. And she talked about this one episode where he would make the girls strip. He would make them strip naked, and he would make them lie face down on the bed, and he would just take out his belt and just would beat them like they were like slaves or something. And Denise would talk about how she would try her best to kind of hide the whelps that she got, on her body when she would go to school, because she didn't, she hated her father, but at the same time, she didn't want him to get in trouble because she didn't know where she would end up. Because she didn't know, for a while, she thought maybe there would be a time where her mother would come back for her. But after a while, when her mother never came, she kind of realized that her mother wasn't coming. So I think she feared that if the abuse was found out, that she would go somewhere else that might be even worse, if that was possible. But so she never said anything. And among the 3 sisters, they just kind of bonded over this abuse and this trauma. And they would try to help one another. Like Denise said that, Patty would try to look out for her and Debbie as well. Like when Debbie would wet herself, they would try to hurry up and clean it up, so the father wouldn't, find out about it. But inevitably, he would find out about it and he would beat her. And this one other episode that Denise talked about was that when Debbie, another time where, she wet herself, he made her get into a hot tub of water and was beating her, having the hot water come off her back and was just beating her in the hot water. And just reading this was just like, man, this was, oh my, it just sounds horrible. And it was horrible. And so this is the childhood that Vanity had. And I think after reading this, it gave me a better insight into the fact that she never really understood what love was. She never really had the type of love that, you would expect for most children to have. And because she had no real understanding of love, I think that definitely affected all of her relationships, not just the relationship she had with Prince, but all of her adult relationships. So this abuse went on, of course, for years until, and eventually her dad remarried at some point, and she got a stepmother. And I don't know, she didn't really talk too much about the stepmother and, what exactly she knew about the abuse. I think she said that her stepmother knew that, the father was, punishing the girls or, whipping the girls. But I don't know if the stepmother knew exactly to the point that, how abusive he was. I don't know. Denise didn't specify that in the book, but I'm kind of curious to know if the stepmother was aware of how bad the abuse was, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, so he got remarried or married, because I don't know if Denise and her father, Denise and the mother, if they were ever married. I don't know. I do know that they did stay together at one point when Denise was very young, and she said that she recalls that when her parents lived together, that the father was very abusive toward her mother and would hit her mother as well. And when she described her father pushing her mother up against the living room wall, it made me think about that scene in Purple Rain. And, there was a rumor for a while that the original script for Purple Rain was actually based on Vanity's life. It was not at all supposed to be based on Prince's life, per se. The rumor was that Vanity and Prince were getting together and writing and coming up with the script themselves. And of course, they were dating at the time. So Vanity would tell Prince all these stories about how bad, her father was toward her. And I'm assuming that particular scene was written based on, something that Vanity told Prince about, her upbringing. But anyway, I'm kind of all over the place with that, but I had to go back a little bit because I do remember, at one point, the parents were living together and then they separated. So they may have been married, may have not been married, I'm not sure. But they separated at some point. And of course, this is all in Canada because Vanity was born in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. And so, like I said, they separated and, Vanity stayed with her mother for the first few years of her life. And then when she was about 5 or 6 years old, then she just left her at her dad's house. So anyway, fast forwarding, going back again to her father remarrying and having this new woman. So they went away to a vacation, her father and this woman, to St. Lucia. And when they came back, her father got really, really sick. And at first I thought it was some kind of like maybe food poisoning because it was something with his stomach. Some like maybe appendicitis or something like that. So anyway, to make a long story short, he ended up dying. And Vanity said that she wasn't sure exactly how she felt about it. She, many years later when she became a born-again Christian, she said she of course forgave her father for all the abuse, all the, pain and trauma that he put her through, her and her sisters. But, at this time, she was just like, yes, God finally answered my prayer, because it's not so much that she was praying for him to die, but that she was praying that something would happen that would cause this pain and trauma that she was going through to go away. And so that's what it was. She ended up, her father ended up dying. And when she was about 15 years old, he passed away. And not too soon after that, she decides to up and move to New York. And she wanted to try to make it as a model. So she got signed to this agency called Ziolo Modeling and Management Agency. And so she started doing some modeling with this agency, with this company in New York. And she talked about, having this friend named Hal that kind of helped her out and, just was there for her. And she ended up going to Japan at this time also and doing some modeling in Japan. And she mentioned that her and her friend were out having lunch in Tokyo one afternoon, and they came into this record store. And that was the very first time she said that she saw Prince, because I guess his second album, the self-titled Prince album, was in the record store. And she said she looked at him on the cover of his album and she said, this man could be my brother. And when I read that part, I was like, oh, Vanity. Okay. So she didn't say, oh my God, I instantly fell in love with him, or, oh my God. No, she said, he looked like he could be my brother. So I thought that was interesting. So she goes back to New York after she does her stint in modeling in Japan. And then she decides to try out Los Angeles because New York was kind of dead. She had, she was doing the things that you do when you're in New York. You go to, Studio 54, you do that whole thing, you party, you meet people, that type of thing. And she just wanted to change the scenery, basically. And so she ended up signing with another modeling agency called William Morris. And we're now up to the early 1980s, 1980 in particular. And this is when she's getting ready to meet Prince for the first time. So I'm actually going to read a little bit from, this is like chapter 19 called Lassoed. And the way she described how, she came upon these tickets. She acted like she just came upon, like somebody stuck 2 tickets to the American Music Awards in her hand. That's how she describes it. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. So 2 tickets were placed in my hands for the American Music Awards and happily received with all the girlish expressions of wow and wee and yippee as anyone would expect. This, I anticipated, would be the very place my dreams might awaken in reality. I checked my lipstick, that being of my greatest contemplation, the perfect shade of color, and hoping it lasted longer than the nails pasted to my fingertips. I rushed toward the big red theater doors and enthusiastically claimed my seat. So she made it seem like, yeah, she had the 2 tickets, but she really didn't specify who else came with her. Now, we all assume, the ones that are in the know anyway, we all assume that she went with Rick James because it was thought that at this time that she was dating Rick James. But I'm gonna read how she kind of cleverly says that she's with Rick James, but at the same time, not with Rick James. It was just like she kind of glossed over it. So, and she actually addresses that she meets Prince, but she doesn't address, like in one interview, she says that she met him because someone came up to her and said, hey, this guy wants to meet you and he wants you to take him to the bathroom. And Vanity was like, I'm not taking him to the bathroom. What does he want me to do? Hold it for him? And so anyway, they had an exchange, kind of in the back of the theater toward the bathrooms. And Vanity said she noticed that when Prince, took off his jacket because he wanted to see if he could wear her jacket, that he didn't have on nothing underneath, like he didn't have on a shirt or nothing. And so in the interview, she said when she saw he was bare-chested, she was like, yeah, that's my type of man. That's my type of guy. But in her book, she doesn't mention anything about this particular encounter. Instead, she kind of beats around the bush. So I'm going to try to find where and then she uses this really like flowery language, like she's just like, oh my God, you'll see what I'm saying. Let me see if I can find it. So she's looking around the theater and then she goes into the ballroom. And so she says, I was led to the ballroom that I recollect a picture that describes 1,000 words. And so when she's talking about the ballroom and talking about this picture that describes 1,000 words, I automatically think of the song, The Beautiful Ones. Because, Prince says, the beautiful ones always smash the picture. So she's talking about recollecting a picture that describes 1,000 words. So I just thought that was unique. So why not join them? Me and my long stem golden shoes with heels to exhaust myself. My stilettos were so very ready to be exiled, having walked 1,000,000 miles around the room. My mouth was agape, my ears tuned up, and arms went flailing and flicking about like a baby butterfly. I was desperately looking for a place to land, yet trying to pose taller than 5'4". Naturally, I assured myself that the dazzling and sparkling diamond crown would soon fit the top of my tiny head. Very soon the lights would sparkle in my direction, while as my chariot of galloping horses would race me home past the tall trees and beckon me through my castle's gate. I was the queen bee, living in my own head and positively under my own delectorious spell. I was floating dizzily atop my over-the-top delirious delusions of magnificence. There I stood speculating, has anyone noticed me in their peripheral vision? And there stood a young man awaiting my smile with a short fishing line and a very large hook in his hand. Surely thou knowest his name. So, of course she doesn't say the name Prince, but we are to assume that she says, surely thou knowest his name, that she is in fact referring to Prince. And later on down the page, she says that so she's standing here, they start communicating. And then there's another gentleman to her right that is also communicating with her, and I'm assuming with Prince. So I'm going to read that part. So she said, cameras were hoovering about, honing in, interrogating for impressive subject material. I, somewhat confused, much like the Great Fall of Babylon, from the semi-automatic bombastic explosion of questions directed at the gentleman on my right. But I can only recall one that mattered. Who is this lovely lady, Prince? Was he really talking of me? Grabbing tight my hand, yanking me closer to his side, he replied defiantly, this is my wife. We parted artfully, that being quite the controversial conversation for the evening, I suppose without the smooth I do attached. And before I could catch my breath going forward and looking back with eyes wide open, a singer toting the name of Rick James stopped by the cameras, caught hold of me as I sauntered by, and muttered the very same words. They soared past my head, whizzing like a boomerang. Meet my wife, everyone. Some might say this could only happen in the movies. With the most auspicious playwright and classical set design, it just might work. What a life-stopping slap-me moment, I thought. So, she's making it seem like she wasn't there with Rick James, that he grabbed her hand for the cameras and said, oh, this is my wife. But before Rick James did it, she claimed that Prince did it. So, this whole particular episode kind of confused me a little bit, because it has me thinking that Vanity is trying to be kind of secretive and not revealing the whole story of what really went down between her, Prince, and Rick James in that whole encounter. But, she has a right. I mean, it's her life. She has a right to be as secretive as she wants to be, I guess. But that whole thing just didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But anyway, moving on. So that's basically how they met. And so later on that night, she says that, after the American Music Awards, she says that he calls her. And so she says, his voice was smooth and gently mysterious over my phone on the eve of the very warm California night. He was memorably apologetic without actually apologizing. For I must say he caught me sleeping. I had met no man like him, unsolved though he was, and oh so romantically intelligent. I fell in love with this young genius, and to the best of my understanding, he fell in love with me. You might say that scripturally it sounded like a great deal of falling, but I held on to my reckless roller coaster of a ride until I was dizzy and out of breath, and then I bought another ticket to the ride. So she's already describing that she was already just smitten with Prince already after one conversation, maybe two. And that as they continued to interact with one another, she was noticing that there were ups and downs. And Prince even kind of alluded to this when he did his last tour, the Piano Microphone tour in 2016, right after her death. Actually, the day of her death, when he was in Australia performing, he mentioned that they, fought all the time, but that they loved each other. And he loved her very much, despite the fact that they would argue and fight. And so she's kind of describing their relationship as being, she said, reckless roller coaster of a ride. And that she kind of got high off of it. Like she got a natural high. Now, of course, we know later that she would start doing drugs. In particular, she would start doing cocaine, and then she would also start doing crack cocaine. And she talks about that in her book as well. But before she really got into drugs, she was getting high off of just being in love with Prince. And she would admit that, she would become jealous because just a few pages over, she talks about, when they went on the 1999 tour, the Triple Threat tour, and, she said the time, Vanity 6 and the Prince entourage, the dressmakers, the makeup, the hair, the bodyguards, lights, equipment, roadies, and the 9,000 interviews and 60 million photographers We were bussed across America for the 1999 tour. It was a lovely thing to live courageously if courage is found to be an integral part of truth in one's life. So she's like I said, a lot of times in her book, she has like what I call this flowery language, or the fact that, she's just so expressive, but she's kind of being very, like, I think she's intentionally being elusive, I guess, if that makes sense. So she talks about that, and then she says, but then she hints at her jealousy, because she says, I press my way through a carnal, listless future, of which looking glamorous without regrets, though sporadically inwardly distressing, especially when my love was found playing in other playpens. So she's saying here that she was distressed because Prince was, of course, as she said, playing in other playpens, meaning that he was basically cheating and that he wasn't being faithful. And that was causing her much distress. And she was wanting a way out because she said, I was an instigator of change. And shall I say, when my bolts were finally loosening in Holiday City, I wanted to do everything I possibly could and do it all in a day's breath. My quest for self-significance helped me. So she was trying to find a way out. And not because she wanted to leave him necessarily, because she said that leaving him was like cutting away at her heart. And she said that it was probably the hardest thing that she ever had to do, because she really loved him. But she loved him enough that she felt like she could leave him, because she wanted to go off on, she wanted to have her own, her own career. At this point, she had done a few like little B-rated movies and things like that while she was still in Canada. And of course her modeling work. But outside of that, she hadn't really, when she started dating Prince, they started doing the whole Vanity 6 thing, and that was it. But she wanted more than that, and she wanted more of him, but he did not allow that, and she talks about, them fighting. And she said, and she admitted that she was probably a little crazy. She said, I must admit my craziness wallowed in with careful absurdity. I was addicted to every moment. And when the elevator came to a screeching halt, I don't recall anyone screaming, jump. When he said it was black, I unreceptively replied it was white. When I was thoroughly famished, he preferred to starve. And when he wanted to stop, I wanted to run like the wind. But we were played, for such a time as that. And only heaven could predict all of our heart-wrenching falls. Two young lions in a taming of the shrew, potentiously bold, ripping apart that which was better untouched, both losing a battle, both so very lost. So she's saying here that both her and Prince were lost in their own way. And she said when the tour had finally completed its long, dedicated season of polished fame, I settled down to amuse myself picking apart the spoils after a long escapade of partying, a simple display of stop, shake, and go off to the bars we blow. I must confess and repent genuinely for my portrayal of salacious, lascivious acts. Again, forgive me. So she's saying that, this was at her time where she was her most immoral self, and that she's asking for the audience to please forgive her, because she admitted that she participated in a lot of things, namely her drug doing, but, maybe some other salaciousness, as she says, that she doesn't actually, pinpoint, but we can make assumptions. And so at this point, she's getting ready to decide to leave. And so she says, she had to, I have to find it, but she said something about here it goes. She just became really lonesome. She said, little in this life of ours unfolds as we romantically predict. And my foe was crooked, and my blade was dull of slicing off the pain of my broken, wayward heart. I admit it was hard to cut him out of me. All I had become was thus painted on my face, vanity. and what I had thus spoken from my vile tongue spewed forth from my juvenile breast of disdain. So you can see kind of like her literary, how she's being really like almost like Old English in a way, is how she's kind of describing this. But this is, and her whole book is like this. So, and a lot of people might not like it for that. I didn't mind it because being a librarian and being an avid reader, her language didn't bother me, but I just really kind of felt like she was, not really telling the whole story. And it kind of disappointed me a little bit. I thought that she would be more candid because, she's writing this in 1997 after, she had become saved and a born again Christian. So my theory is the reason why she was so elusive was because she was trying to paint the picture of, okay, God has delivered me. Jesus has delivered me from this. Because the end of the book is just her preaching. She was doing this Q&A and she's just basically preaching. So her book is actually, like I said, it's not a very long book. And it actually, if you're curious how I was able to get the book. So on her estate page, it actually is just called blameItonvanity.com. At one point they were selling these books for like $60 because it took me a long time to find the book because it's nowhere else other than this estate page. And now if you go to the page, they're not saying that any copies are available. So I don't know if they all sold out or what the issue is, but it was a very hard book to locate. And so, but anyway, going back to what she's saying about how she had to cut Prince out and how it really hurt her. She said, so lonesome and rather loathsome was this meeting, but certainly not the reason my love bound and branded me. I got lost looking for his mirror. Because remember, Prince said that when he met Vanity, he saw her as being like the female version of himself. Like if he was looking in a mirror and if he was a female, that Vanity would be that female. And so she's saying after so long that she got lost looking for his mirror. And I think that she likes that she was at a point where she was still trying to find out who she was as a woman. She had done all this modeling and she done a little acting and, she got with Prince, she fell in love, fell head over heels. And then, she became Vanity in Vanity 6. And I think it just all was very overwhelming to her and very surreal. And it was a journey that I don't think that she was quite ready for at the time. And so, like she said, she was on this roller coaster ride and trying to find a way to get off. And so when she left Prince and went with Motown, she thought that this would be a way for her to, become her own person, move out on her own. And she said that it had its highs and lows. It's Motown trimmings is how she described it. And that she was finally, to a spot where she thought that she was doing good, but that's when the drugs started. That's when she started, doing the cocaine and started smoking the crack, and how it would just end up just being the beginning of the end in a way for her. And it got to the point where, she was running away from herself, as it was seen. Not only running away from Prince and their relationship, but running away from herself. And it got her to the point where she started getting sick, and she ended up her kidney. She would end up dying from renal failure, but she had renal failure in the late 80s into the early 90s. And after she was in the hospital in 92 or 93, that's when she became started on her sobriety. And because she felt like God was giving her another chance at life, because the doctors had said she only had 3 days to live when she was in the hospital because the cocaine had just ruined her kidneys. And I believe that right before she died, she was doing dialysis. And I think she decided to stop the dialysis, and that's what eventually led to her death. But yeah, and that was because of her cocaine usage. She had, at that point, by 92, she had been doing cocaine for a better part of like 5, 6, 7, 8 years probably. And that was enough, like maybe even longer than that. That was enough to ruin her, destroy her kidneys. and she would later pay with her life. But she, at the time though, in the 90s, she was so happy that God decided to give her another chance at life that she decided that she would dedicate her life to God. I mean, it is beautiful when you think about it. If you're a Christian, and I'm a Christian, I don't know, if you are not a Christian, you may not be able to understand, but being a Christian, I can understand how it feels to know that, Jesus loves you and that he forgives you for, your sins. And she really talks about that and how she felt like, God was the only person that she had after, she ended up sick in the hospital. And of course, for y'all that don't know, she did end up getting married to this guy, this football player, and I can't remember his name, and she didn't even talk about that part at all. But anyway, he ended up being very abusive toward her as well. And he ended up, after they divorced, he ended up like killing 3 people, and he was like on death row or something in Texas, I think. Or maybe he just got life in prison. I can't remember. Probably just life in prison. But I was just like, damn. Like, I mean, it's just like she had such a hard life. And it's not just, her relationship with Prince. Because she didn't say, of course, anything about there being any abuse with Prince. Which I'm glad for. She only said, nothing but nice things about him. But she really didn't speak too much on him, other than, the time that they first met, and that she, talked that they would argue, and that she hated to have to leave him, but she felt like she had to, because she felt like, that he was, kind of controlling her, I think, and she didn't want to be controlled like that. And she wanted for them to be together, but at the same time, she wanted them to be together on her terms, and in the same way, Prince wanted them to be together on his terms. And so they were just, like she said, they were just 2 hardened bulls, just fighting for dominance. And a relationship like that is never going to work. And a lot of people, like I said, have these rose-colored view of Prince and Vanity's relationship, but I think it was very tumultuous. And I think that, they loved each other, and maybe they didn't realize how deep they loved each other, because they were both very young. They were both in their 20s. And young people like that, sometimes when you're in it, when you're in love, you don't really realize that's what it is. Despite all the fights and all the bickering and all the arguing, they loved each other. But they also had a very toxic relationship, and the fact that they were constantly fighting, and the fact that Prince was constantly cheating on her, and the fact that, Vanity was not going to put up with that. She wasn't like, some of his other girlfriends, like Jill Jones, who knew that Prince was seeing other women. And while she may have had an issue with it, she was like, that's just whatever. That's just how he is. Vanity wasn't so quick to be like that. She admitted that she was jealous, and that she didn't like the idea, like she said, of Prince playing in other playpens. And that caused her much distress. And she was just like, I can't do this. And almost in the same way, I think his other girlfriend, Susanna Melvoin, I think she felt the same way. And that, I think the cheating obviously is what pushed both of them away in the end. But I think for Susanna especially, she just was just, like, I can't keep doing this. Like, you're so, because Prince was one of those people, he was very black and white. There wasn't a lot of gray when it came to his feelings, especially when he felt, when he was interested in a young lady. And I think for Susanna and for Vanity, I felt like both of them felt like there should be a little gray area, and that would allow them to keep their own identity, and not, because for the rest of their lives, they're going to always be associated with Prince. And I think for Vanity, that wasn't good enough for her. Like, excuse me. I don't think she minded the association, but she still wanted other people to see her for who she was. And that's why when she branched out and did other movies like Action Jackson and The Last Dragon, and, she was trying to make an identity for herself that wasn't connected to Prince. And not to say that she wasn't, excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink, sorry y'all. And not to say that that Vanity didn't appreciate all the work that Prince did and put in for her for Vanity 6 and that whole thing. I'm sure she was very appreciative, but at the same time, she wanted to exert who she was. Once again, that's why she wanted more money than what Prince was willing to pay her for Purple Rain. And that's why she ended up not doing it. And not only because of that, but of course, their own personal relationship was falling apart because she ended up moving to Minneapolis from, I think, Los Angeles. And and after she moved in to with Prince at his Purple House, now at the same time that she was there, now mind you, Jill Jones was also staying at the Purple House. So you can only imagine how crazy that must have been. These two women sleeping with this one man and knowing it. Now, I don't know. Now, I'll take that back because I don't know. Now, Jill Jones, I knew that she was aware that Vanity and Prince were a couple. But I don't know exactly how Vanity felt about Jill Jones. And I don't think, from what I understand, though, from what Jill has said in other interviews that I've listened to, she made it seem like her and Vanity were on good terms. You know, that they were not like besties, but they were cool. So, but it still makes me wonder, with Vanity being the type of woman that she was, why she was willing to allow this other woman stay in this space with Prince. Even though, yeah, I mean, it's Prince's house, of course, but I mean, what did Vanity think that Jill was there for? You know, like, surely she knew that, you know, Prince was still sleeping with her and having a relationship with Jill. So I just wonder about that whole dichotomy, that whole, you know, that whole situation. But anyway, I digress. But basically, that's basically the book. Like I said, she talks about, you know, her time after she left Prince with Motown. And then she talks about, you know, her drug use. And then, you know, when she had her epiphany was when she was in the hospital. And she said that Jesus spoke to her and said that, I love you, Denise. And I want you to know that I forgive you and you need to forgive yourself. And so at that point, she decided to throw off the whole Vanity persona, because to her, Vanity was just that, vanity, which means it's useless, it's meaningless, it's puffed up. And her name, Denise, she said, actually means wise discerner. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's what she said, that's what her real name meant. And so that's what she wanted to go by. And she wanted to, you know, she no longer wanted to be Vanity. She became this pastor and just dedicated her life to Christ for the rest of her life. And the end of the book is just, like I said, basically her answering questions and quoting the Bible, basically like a sermon, basically. And then she just really was trying to bring people to Christ. She said that was really the real reason why she wrote this book, was because she was trying to bring people to Christ. That was her number one goal. And not so much to talk about, you know, her life, but, you know, to use her life as an example of, if I can go through this and God can bring me through this, then God can bring you through any and everything as well. And that was beautiful. That was beautiful. And I appreciate, you know, her sentiment that she had with that. But I just kind of, if I'm being honest, I just really wish that she would have said more about her relationship with Prince and her other relationships that she had with other men. Because after she left Prince, of course, she dated Anthony Ant, who was a British singer. And then she also dated, what is his name from Motley Crue? Nikki Sixx. And so the joke was she was about to be, you know, Vanity Sixx again, because they were engaged to be married at one point. And he actually talks about in his book, from what I understand, that Vanity actually introduced him to smoking crack. Because before that, he would only do like marijuana and maybe a little cocaine, but she was the one who introduced him to smoking crack. And he would later almost have a fatal overdose. And actually, he did die for a few minutes, but he was brought back. And he kind of talks about how, Prince was still kind of in communication with Vanity when they were together. And I've read other articles where Prince was still calling Vanity when she was actually married to that football guy. And so they kept in contact for a long time. And there were other times where, they would communicate via telephone and they would pray for each other. Like in 2007, right before, around the time that he did the Super Bowl, they supposedly talked on the phone and prayed for each other. So they kept in touch. Now, I don't know past that how long they were in touch, but I do know that when she was in the hospital a few times, that Prince did attempt to pay for some of her medical bills. From what I understand, she did not allow him to, or wouldn't want him to. And part of the reason, so what he ended up doing, because she didn't want any money from him or anything like that. That's how that song on the Come album, the outro, Orgasm. So the proceeds for that supposedly went to Vanity's medical bills, because that was the only way that he could kind of like slickly, give her some money, because she wasn't accepting any money outright. And so she got the money for the royalties, because that the song Orgasm came from a Vanity 6 song called Vibrator. And so the proceeds for that, the royalties for that, went to Vanity automatically. And so that was Prince's way of making sure that she got some money, because she wouldn't accept any money outright. And so I know a lot of people don't know that backstory, but that's the way of it. And I guess I could understand where why she declined to take any money from him, because that's not what she was on. She didn't want any money because she was trying to get away from that, that whole Vanity persona. She didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so she, naturally, at this point was associating that Vanity persona with Prince, even though, of course, by now, Prince himself had long moved on. But that just goes to show that after all that time, he still very much cared for her. And, and of course, her death right before his, he was devastated, learning about her, her death right before he went on stage, from what I understand. February 15th of 2016 was when she passed away. And Prince was getting ready to go on stage for the Piano Microphone Tour in Australia, I believe, when he was told of her death. And so he dedicated some songs to her, Little Red Corvette. I also think he did The Beautiful Ones, which he did write about her. And I read an article where he said toward the end of the song, when he says, "I'm begging down on my knees, I want you," he says, "I'm begging you, please, Denise." And that you could hear in his voice that he was just breaking down, like he wanted to break down and cry. And now that they're both gone, I'm ending now, but I just hope that they have maybe found one another again on the other side, and that they are able to reconcile the things that they couldn't say in this life to one another. Because Vanity, in another interview, she had once said that, Prince was the love of her life, and that she hoped that one day, they would maybe reconnect. And she even said as much in her book that she was always, looking for him, like around certain corners. And she didn't say the name Prince, but, she did say, one day my Prince will come, around the corner, and I need to be ready, So he was always not too far from her mind. And in the same way, I think that Vanity was never too far from Prince's mind. Because a lot of people point out that a lot of the women that he dated after her kind of resembled her in some way. And in particular, his second wife, Manuela, was pretty much a Vanity clone. And they do look very similar. That is true. And so, we all know that Prince had a type. And I think that Vanity, without a doubt, was his first love. And a woman that I don't think he ever got over. Like, of course, he dated plenty of women, but I think Vanity was always his first true love. And you never forget your first. You never forget your first. No matter how many people you talk to or sleep with or interact with or any kind of romantic sense, you always remember your first love. And I still remember my first love. God rest his soul. You never forget them. And so you always carry a piece of them with you. And I think for Prince, that was ultimately what Vanity was his first love. And as much as he might have loved his wives, not to say that he didn't love Maite and Manuela, because I know he did, but he never forgot Vanity. And Vanity never forgot about him. So with that, hopefully I like this review. Like I said, the book was interesting. But it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. Like I said, I thought it would be a little bit more salacious. So I hope this book review, I hope you don't find it boring. But basically, like I said, she was on a mission to win souls for Christ for this book. And I deeply respect that. So she kind of left a lot of stuff very vague, other than like certain points that I've already talked about. So I'm not going to keep talking about it, but you get it. So I'm going to end the episode, even though I just said, just like a preacher, that I was going to end it a couple of minutes ago. But I really am going to end it now. So coming up next, I have a review of the Love Symbol album, which is one of my favorite albums of the 90s. And I'm also going to be talking more about Prince's love life in the 90s. So I had an episode where I talked about different women that he dated in the 80s. And so this is going to be like the part 2 to that, where I'm going to be talking about women like Robin Powers, crazy ass. Nona Gay, Maite, of course, Carmen Electra, women like that. And so if I could think of anybody else, there were a couple other, like Troy Bear, I think was her name. So there's other like little minor, I don't want to say they're minor, but he probably didn't date them for too long is what I mean by minor. Like Troy Bear, I don't think he dated her for too long. But she was the girl in the sexy MF video, the one that, he grabbed her butt and all that. That's who Troy Bear is. And some other, and like Diamond and Pearl, like he allegedly dated, I think, Diamond. So, people, girls like that, there's not much to be said about, because there's not a lot written about, their relationship. So I'm only going to focus probably on Robin Power, Maite, Carmen Electra, and Nona Gay. Those are the 4 ladies that I'm going to be talking about when I get to that episode. So that episode is coming up as well. So I also have another Purple Kingdom episode, because this, like I said, this episode was both a book review and a Purple Kingdom episode about Vanity. So it serves 2 purposes. But my next Purple Kingdom episode will also kind of be like the same setup, because they also wrote a book, Morris Day. So I'm going to be reviewing Morris Day's book and talking about his relationship with Prince. And Morris is a little bit more forthcoming than Vanity was in her book. So that'll be interesting. So stay tuned to that. So once again, thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. I very much appreciate it. And so I am signing off. I love you guys, and stay tuned for more. Peace and be wild, and may you live to see the dawn. Bye.